How is everybody doing? Welcome to Red Alert Diaries Live with Tanya E. Hood. I'm glad to get the chance to see you again. Hoping your day was amazing. And if you listen to this morning's episode, then you know we are going to have a conversation about parenting. So let me ask you, what are your thoughts? If you saw it, leave that information in the chat. And I have you guys up and live so I can take a look at you along the way. And see your comments as we go through this process. But one of the things I was sharing, there were three elements. As we go through this thing called parenting, there's three things that I found that I shared this morning. One of them is you got to know you. We have so much happening in this world telling us we got to do this. We got to raise our kids this way. We got to do these. Old ways weren't working. This isn't working. There's a whole lot of information. But you know what I learned the most having raised my sons and a couple of other people along the way? Parenting is unique to you. It's unique to you and that child. With everything that's happening in the world, when you are clear about who you are at the core of your being, it makes it easy for you to parent the child that you have because you are the right parent for that child right now in this moment. I shared that earlier today because it took me a long time to discover I am doing good. Now, I'm not the traditional mommy like everybody else in the world. I was raised a tomboy. So when I had children, wanted the little people around, but I didn't know what to do with them because growing up, I was not the little girl that you left your children with. If you wanted somebody babysitting, you didn't leave your kids with me until they were 5 years old. Now, once they're walking and talking, can have a conversation with them, I got you covered. But between that gap when they're small up until they're five, I didn't do well. I didn't know how to function. And then it was really bad because when I had my first child, I couldn't even change a diaper so that that little boy can keep it on. It was so sad. And I had everybody telling me everything with all these things. And because I was still in the midst of discovering me, because I got married at 21, also had my first child at 21. 21-year-old Tanya was still discovering life, still discovering herself, still discovering what I needed to do. And I had a foundation, I had a good foundation, and I'm thankful for that. But there were some elements in my foundation that I also spoke about this morning, because there are some things in our past that we picked up. If you were raised in a household that gave you great elements, keep those, treasure those, and pass them on. But there are also some things that we receive in our family that's not best suited to keep moving through generation, and generation. One of the things that I know that I learned when I was listening to my oldest, he was about 4 or 5 around this time. I can't remember exactly. But he was upstairs in his room, just a yelling and a screaming. Now, my children are 6 years apart. So there was nobody hanging out. He wasn't playing with any friends. When I went upstairs to check on this little boy to see what is he yelling for, he has his toys on one side of the room and he's on the other and he's yelling. I discovered that was behavior that he picked up from me. As much as we want to tell our children to do things, the fastest way anybody learns anything is by watching you. So your parenting skills, it's going to come from how much you are displaying. So if you're displaying behavior that you do not want displayed, your children are going to pick that up first. My son was a real wake-up call that I yelled. I yelled a lot. I yelled because my grandmother raised me raising a whole bunch of kids. She was always calling somebody to do this, that, and the other. So I was raised in a high volume household that yelled all the time, and it became second nature. But when I heard my child repeat the patterns that I had picked up from my past, I had to make a decision. We are sometimes not really cognizant of what we're bringing to the table, the behaviors that we display, the actions that we're showing. It's subconscious. And this morning I kept trying to think about the word habit. Yeah, those habits are those like unrecognized behaviors that we just do on a regular basis. Habits can be good. Habits can be supportive. But if that behavior that you are displaying in that habit is not helping you and will not help others, you need to check it because you're going to pass it on, just like I passed on the bad behavior of screaming and yelling. And I got it because my grandmother, when she was raised on a farm. So while you're out in the farm and somebody's calling you, they yelled. Your nearest neighbors, because you're on a farm far away, you yelled. It was a habit that she picked up and a habit that she passed on and a habit that I passed on, but that behavior, oh, I had to make an adjustment. So one of the things that I shared in this morning's episode is that yes, they say it takes 21 days to create a habit. My answer to that is still no. It takes 21 days for you to recognize that the habit exists that you want, but you haven't truly implemented it. It's not normal. It's not second nature, which is what a habit is. A habit is second nature. It's so mundane. It is so boring. You don't even think about it. Most of the time, you're unaware that you're even doing it. So I shared take 100 days. Do one thing that you want changed for 100 days. It's in that time period that you'll start creating the habits and behaviors that will support you on the journey. To keep my son from yelling, I had to first be conscious of my yelling moments. And I realized that I yelled because the behavior was if I'm in this part of the house, I'll be yelling because you're up there. So I had to create the habit of going to him, walking to wherever he is. So y'all know I'm still getting over the cold. So bear with me as I go through this because I want to make sure that you get this information. But I decided to walk. If I was downstairs and he was upstairs, I would walk up. If I was upstairs and he was down, I would walk down. If I was wherever it was, instead of yelling, I would walk to him. And when I heard him yelling, had to course correct. So in my course correction, what did I do? Using a behavior counterintuitive can often counteract a behavior that you don't want to have. I typically say interrupt your pattern. So I had to interrupt the pattern of yelling with whispering. So when he was yelling, I would, and the first time I did it, he was like, Mommy, he started crying. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I said, then stop yelling so we can talk. Eventually, he course corrected. And I eventually created a new behavior. Knowing who you are at the core of your being supports you being the parent that you need to be, passing on the values that you want to pass. Because I was passing on values that my grandmother gave me. I passed on good stuff, like pay attention to your environment. They need to know how to do that, especially in this day and age. You've got to help them recognize what's happening around them so that they can adjust accordingly. Give them the behaviors that they need, especially if you're parenting after divorce. Because after I got divorced, I still had to, as a Black single mother raising Black sons in America, give them skill sets, insight, and values that I wanted shared. Because I was told by the world that being a single Black mother, raising single Black sons in this country, they would sell dope, buy dope, use dope, go to jail, or be dead before their 21st birthday. Mm. Those odds of listening to what the world says because of how I was raising them, being single, here's the thing. I raised them based off of strengthening who I was. I recognized that there was a good foundation that I did have laid. So I took the good pieces and I realized there were holes in my foundation. So I filled it in with other things that I needed. Like I did not want to yell anymore. So I had to create a new landing pad as a foundation for my children. I wanted them to know that even though there is chaos that will happen around you because my divorce was the first thing that I had to deal with were teaching my child that life, life will throw rocks at you. And when life throws rocks at you, you can either catch them and build a better foundation or figure out how to duck and dodge along the way. You see, in this morning's episode, I shared a story that I learned from, can't remember where I even saw it, but life is hard. There are things that you're going to experience that is not going to be easy. And when you walk through that journey, you're going to need to know how to deal with life when it starts throwing rocks at you. But there will come a time where there will be some boulders, massive things in your world that will take you out. It is in that element, at that time, during those moments, that you're going to need to trust in a being greater than yourself. When I was reminded of the story and I shared, let me pause because you guys are probably talking to me and I'm just going on and on and on and on. When I shared inside of this morning's episode, the story that someone told me about this guy that was just walking along. And as he was walking along, he felt a rock being thrown, a rock being tossed. And it got to the place where he was like, hey, I thought that if I trusted God, had faith in God, I wouldn't have to deal with so much of the woes of the world. These rocks that life keeps throwing at me, keep coming at me. Lord, if you are there, why don't you deal with the rocks? The next scene that we see is Jesus holding back massive boulders. You see, the thing that was coming through were the small elements, the small pieces that we find that's often discomforting, like getting a divorce after 11 years of marriage. You had spent a third of your life with one person, and now you got to figure out how to do this thing alone, and you've got addition. How do you raise your children in a two-parent household and still give them the values that you want them to have to know that love is still good? I did not give you the best example that you could hold on to, but I want you to know love is still a firm foundation. Love is still something you should strive for. Still commit yourself to being present for someone else. And even though I didn't give a good example, because another thing that I shared is that I wanted to be the model for my babies, because they're still going to mimic you even in their teenage years. As they get older, we are thinking that they're older now and they can start doing some things, but they're still mimicking. They'll either mimic you because you are modeling a behavior that you want them to pass on to the next generation, or they'll mimic the world, what the world tells them to do, who the world tells them to be, how the world tells them to function. You are still the first foundation for your babies. Give them what you got and continue to model it. In this morning's episode, I shared that there were places I didn't go, things I didn't do, songs I didn't listen to, movies I didn't watch, because there were some elements I wanted to be clear that my children could always go back and say, hey, you see me do that? If that's not something I think I should pour inside of my soul, then I don't think it's something you should pour inside of yours. Now, when they get older and on their own, they'll do what they want to do. But while they are in your home, give them the landing pad that they need to fall hard. And I wish I had learned then, which is why I'm telling you now. Let them learn their lessons hard, but be the model so that they can see life will throw rocks at you. It will get difficult, but I can make it. I made choices, so it can be done. And when they choose, because they will, to do their thing, they'll still be able to one day, now that my sons are older, men that have never gone through any of the things that the world said that they would walk through with me being their mama. I haven't had to deal with drugs. I haven't had to deal with gangs. I haven't had to deal with death. Thank you, Jesus. And I haven't had to deal with prison or the excess chaos that young Black men in America often end up in because they are stuck with one parent households that aren't able to sometimes give them all that they need. You can, as a single parent, give your children what you need. I was clear about who Tanya was. And as I got more clarity in the aftermath of my divorce about who I am, I was able to give my children more clarity about who they are. And in that is what made me the best parent for that child in that moment at that time, even though life had thrown rocks at me. So that is a gist of what I wanted to share, an extended discussion point. And if you have some parenting ideas and parenting tips that we can use, leave them in the comments so that I can see them, so that I can have the extended discussion with you and those around you. And so for today, if you don't remember anything else that was shared, no, life may be hard. Parenting can be difficult, but you and your amazing self can be the model that that child needs. Do what you would love for them to do in the future. Do now what you want generations to come to have as a foundation. And if you find that there was chaos in yours, rebuild it and pass on the good because you knowing you is enough for that child. If you want someone to join you on the journey, feel free to go to my website, tanyaehood.com. There you can click under the Work With Me tab and see the various ways that we can work with one another. And you can often see how to contact me on YouTube. It's easy to reach out to me. And I'm hoping that this has been a support to you. Go back and listen to the full episode so that you can get the other tips and a little more explained details. I look forward to seeing you guys later.